So let us start the second part of anemia. So in the last class we have discussed only about classification of anemia. Now we will discuss some other parts. So in the last class we have given our study which is known as morphological classification of anemia. And we expected that in morphological classification you know the three basic parameters. These are mean corpuscular volume, mean corpuscular hemoglobin and mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration. But still I am repeating these things and I am giving in a nutshell about their character. MCV or mean corpuscular volume is the average diameter of one RBC. The average diameter of one RBC is calculated by dividing PCV by RBC in millions. And the unit is femtoliter, FL. So PCV, average packed cell volume, approximately it is 0.45, that is 45. And RBC in million. And if you consider both about male and female, so it is approximately 5 million per cubic millimeter. And then the whole thing will be multiplied by 10. So MCV approximately is 90 femtoliter and the range is 80 to 97 femtoliter. So anything more than 100 is size is more, that is macrocytosis. Anything lower than 80, particularly below 78, it is microcytosis. So that is for MCV. So the next parameter is mean corpuscular hemoglobin. Mean corpuscular hemoglobin or MCH is the average amount of hemoglobin that will be present in per RBC. So it is it is calculated by the hemoglobin percentage so hemoglobin percentage divided by RBC in million into 10 and the unit is picogram, PG. So again if you think the hemoglobin percentage of average normal adult is about 15 and so the RBC in million is 5. So it will come around 30. So 30 picogram. So 27 to 33 picogram is the range. Below which there will be hypochromasia and above which there is no tone. Because hyperchromasia is not go with the description of RBCs. It is always hypochromasia or normal. And the third parameter is MCHC. So it is divided by so it is expressed as so it is a percentage, not gram nor liter. It is a percentage which is calculated by hemoglobin percent, that is 15, PCV, that is approximately 45 into 100, so it will come around about 33%. So that is the NCAC. These three are known as the RBC indices. Okay. Now the another thing left is in anemia is the general clinical features of anemia. So in anemia, usually the patients will present with non-specific symptoms like weakness. The commonest presentation symptom is weakness, lethargy, early fatigability, and if it is severe anemia, there can be respiratory distress, and there can be also intercurrent infections. So these are the features which can occur as a result of anemia. And then the other features will occur as a result of the precipitating cause. Suppose if it is hemolytic anemia, then there will be some changes. If it is occurring as a result of megaloblastic anemia, then there will be some changes. This type of abnormality. Usually in anemia, there is a nutritional abnormality. So features of vitamin deficiency, mineral deficiency, etc. will be present with the clinical features. But the general features of any anemia is lethargy, weakness, anorexia, and there can be nausea, but the main thing is that early fatigability and also respiratory distress. Okay. With this background, now we are coming into a specific type of anemia, that is hemolytic anemia. Hemolytic anemia, in the last class discussion, we are told that it can be either defect due to RBC, that is intracorpuscular defect, or it can be defect outside the RBC, what is known as extracorpuscular defect. Intracorpuscular defects are predominantly congenital, whereas extracorpuscular defects are predominantly acquired. And the commonest intracorpuscular defects can be different congenital anemias like thalassemias, like hemoglobinopathies, like different enzyme deficiencies, or abnormality in the cell membrane. Whereas the extracorpuscular defects can be antibody mediated, can be traumatic, can be as a result of infection, can be as a result of different toxins and chemicals. Okay. Now we are coming into the basic physiology of hemolysis. The lifespan of an RBC is 120 days. Then what thing will occur? The older RBCs will be destroyed by the reticuloendothelial cells. Now spleen has the highest concentration of those reticuloendothelial cells. So the major destructing site or the major killing field of RBC is the spleen. It can also be destroyed in the bone marrow, in the liver, any part, but usually in the lymph nodes also. But it is in the spleen, and that is known as extravascular hemolysis. So because it occurs outside the blood vessels, and that is physiological. And this physiological hemolysis occurs because suppose there are some cells which will line these reticuloendothelial cells will line the sinusoids of the spleen. So they are the nucleated cells. They will line the sinusoids of the spleen. Now in between these cells, the anucleated RBC will pass. So they have to change their shape in order to pass through these sinusoids. With aging, their membrane will become tough, their membrane will become brittle, and so they will be identified by these cells, and so these cells will not allow the aged RBC to pass through. Rather, they will take the RBC as a whole and will then digest them inside the cell. So in this way, the older RBCs will be destroyed inside the spleen. And now due to any cause, if the RBC from the very beginning will become, the cell membrane will become brittle. Suppose the RBCs have some deficiency in enzymes like glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase. In that case, there will be always oxidant injury to the RBC, and that oxidant injury will give rise to continuous membrane damage and membrane loss. So, in spite of, though a RBC should be live for 120 days, now as a result of this total membrane loss, by 30 or 40 days, their membrane will become so tough that they cannot pass through the sinusoidal cells. So now the sinusoidal cells will uptake them and will destroy them. So there will be premature extravascular hemolysis or accelerated extravascular hemolysis, which will give rise to hemolytic anemia. So this is the extravascular hemolysis. Now, hemolysis can occur also inside the blood vessels. Normally, very little amount of RBC will be destroyed during the circulation. So, usually, whenever there will be significant intravascular hemolysis, that is pathological. When it will occur? Suppose there are some antibody that is developing against the RBC. So, that antibody will destroy the RBC in the presence of complement and the inflammatory cells. Suppose there are some toxins like snake venom, so that contain direct hemolytic elements, so that will destroy the RBC membrane, and so RBC will be destroyed. So they will be destroyed inside the circulation. So they are known as intravascular hemolysis. And again I am giving extravascular hemolysis can be physiological, can be pathological, but usually intravascular hemolysis means it is pathological. Now, what are the difference between these two hemolysis in clinical presentation? Whenever there will be excess extravascular hemolysis, what do you expect? The patient will suffer from anemia because RBCs are destroyed, no problem there. Number two, whenever RBC are destroyed, then hemoglobin will be catabolized. What will be the outcome? Bilirubin. So there will be unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia. Okay, up to this point there is no problem. Then number three, what will be the change? There will be organomegaly. The spleen has to work hard in order to kill. So they have to increase their blood. They have to increase the reticuloendothelial cell number because they have to usually whenever there will be normally, suppose they have to kill 1000 RBC per day. But now in this situation they have to kill 30,000 RBC per day. So whenever they have to work hard, so the reticuloendothelial cell number will be increased. So there will be splenomegaly. So the next important thing is splenomegaly. So features of extravascular hemolysis is anemia, jaundice, along with organomegaly, particularly splenomegaly. There can be also hepatomegaly. Okay, that is the feature of extravascular hemolysis. No need to remember. Just you think. This thing will occur. So this is clear. So next is the intravascular hemolysis. Now before going into intravascular hemolysis, I have just to give you the changes that occur serially after intravascular hemolysis. So whenever RBC will be destroyed within the blood vessel, so hemoglobin will be released. So these hemoglobin cannot be remain free in the circulation. They will be taken by a protein which is known as haptoglobin. So haptoglobin will uptake the hemoglobin that will be released. If there will be massive amount of hemolysis, then haptoglobin will be already saturated. Then what thing will occur? The next thing will come, the protein will come as hemopexin. So first haptoglobin, when it is saturated, then hemopexin. If it is also not available, then albumin. In this way, the hemoglobin will join. Now, if the amount of hemoglobin released is much more than that, then there is no way hemoglobin will pass through the kidney. So now it will coming into the urine, and urine color will be cola color. So that is known as hemoglobin urea. Hemoglobin in urine, so hemoglobin urea. Now what kidney will do? Kidney, after it passes through the glomerular basement membrane, then there will be kidney tubules. So those tubular cells will also absorb protein. So they will take the hemoglobin. When this power is overcome, then there will be only hemoglobin urea. You understand my point? So initially, hemoglobin, if it is, the hemoglobin will be taken by those cells. So there again, the hemoglobin will be degraded. It will be converted into hemosiderin. The iron containing part will be converted into hemosiderin. Now these epithelial cells, they will be also continuously stuffed into the urine and will be replaced by new epithelial cells. So whenever those epithelial cells will be sloughed and go into the urine, so they will take the hemosiderin with them. So there will be hemosideриnuria. So now we think about the clinical features of intravascular hemolysis. There will be anemia, no problem there. There will be unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, because that will be always there. The third thing will be there can be hemoglobinuria and hemosideриnuria. And organomegaly is usually may not be so much prominent. There can be also increase in the organ, because some amount of antibody that will be produced that will coat the RBC, and those coated RBCs which are coated by antibody can be taken by reticular endothelial cells from the circulation, and they can be also destroyed in the spleen or in the liver. So there can be little enlargement of the organs if it is a continuous process. Suppose there is autoimmune hemolytic anemia, like a continuous disease like SLE. In SLE, if there is always a continuous destruction of the RBC. In those cases, there can be organomegaly. But usually, organomegaly is not expected. So what you get? You will get anemia, you will get jaundice, and you will get hemoglobinuria and also hemosideриnuria. And if you examine blood, in this case, you get low level of haptoglobin, low level of hemopexin, and also hemoglobinemia. That means free hemoglobin within the blood. So these are the features which are the main difference between intra and extravascular hemolysis. So what are the example of extravascular hemolysis? All congenital hemolytic anemias are examples of extravascular hemolysis. Intravascular hemolysis, mainly the toxins. So snake venom, bee venom, lead poisoning, etc. All these can, and also the autoimmune and isoimmune hemolytic anemia to some extent. But this immune hemolytic anemia can also accelerate extravascular hemolysis. So I think it is clear now. Intravascular hemolysis and extravascular hemolysis. Okay. Now what will be the clinical picture and what will be the laboratory investigations of a case of hemolytic anemia? So So lab diagnosis, we are much more concerned. We are the pathologists, so we are much more concerned about the lab diagnosis. So what we do? Number one, before going to lab diagnosis, you will be suspect that the patient is suffering from hemolytic anemia, because he or she is suffering from anemia, unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, with or without organomegaly, with or without passage of deep colored or cola colored urine, with or without passage of hemocytic. So if this history is present, then you will think about hemolytic anemia. Now, what do you expect in the peripheral smear? So in peripheral smear examination, before peripheral smear examination, blood examination, hemoglobin, the level of hemoglobin will be low, and it can be variable. Usually moderate to severe diminution, but mild diminution is also can be possible. Okay, so hemoglobin. ESR. So what about ESR? It is usually increased, except in some special type of hemolytic anemia, like sickle cell anemia, like thalassemia, where the RBC shape is so much altered that ESR change is not so much high. Anemia is 3, in that case hemoglobin is 3, in that case ESR should be in the range of 80 or 90, but here it will come down to 30 or 40 because of the extreme distortion of the shape of the RBC. So the RBC will not form rouleau and will not precipitate. So this will be the ESR. Now what about the and then another biochemical investigations already I have told you that there will be unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia, and whenever there will be cell destruction, then one enzyme is always high in biochemistry, that is LDH or lactate dehydrogenase. That is almost present in almost all the cells. Any body cell destroyed, there will be increase in the LDH. Had it been cardiac cell, is it in liver cell, is it in RBC, all these cases the LDH level will be high. So biochemical investigations, there will be increase in the LDH, increase in the unconjugated portion of the bilirubin. An unconjugated portion of the bilirubin, in that case, patient will be jaundice, but what will be the urine color? Yes, urine color will be wrong color, because the unconjugated bilirubin is bound to albumin and cannot cross the glomerular filtrate. So unconjugated hyperbilirubinemia will always give rise to light colored urine. Though there is deep color in the eye, but the urine that will be passed will be light color. And that is also typical. If you ask, they will also volunteer this information. Okay, now about what will be the RBC series. The RBC morphology, in majority of the cases, it is normocytic normochromic. But in thalassemia, it will be already we have discussed in last class, it is microcytic hypochromic. So no, and even whenever there will be severe hemorrhage, after that the RBC morphology can be also macrocytic. So RBC morphology is not diagnostic of any hemolytic process. It can be normocytic normochromic, it can be microcytic hypochromic in case of thalassemia, or even it can be macrocytosis. Okay. The next will be anisocytosis. There will be severe anisocytosis. Size variation will be much more. Poikilocytosis. Yes, there will be much more. There will be increased poikilocytosis. There will be much more variation in the cell, and there are few specific cells which can give you the clue that the patient is suffering from this type of disease. Look at the cells. The first one is a normal RBC, where there is a central pallor surrounded by the hemoglobin ring. The second one is a target cell. when the hemoglobin ring is outside is very thin and with a central portion of hemoglobinization. That is called a target cell, and that is a feature of thalassemia. It can occur also other diseases, but that is a feature of thalassemia. This is a sickle cell. So this is occurring as a result. This is shaped like a sickle. So this is occurring as a result of sickle cell anemia. This is a teardrop cell. It can occur with other conditions which will give rise to bone marrow changes, like myelocystic anemia. You may not remember these things. Then there can be also stomatocytes. They are looking like lips, stomatocytes. So they are also occurring as a result of severe anemia. So different poikilocytic changes can occur. Anisocytosis and poikilocytosis will be much more. Now the next thing is that whenever there will be RBC synthesis, RBC will be synthesized from the blast cells. Then after blast cells there will be normoblasts.